What's going on, guys? Ryan O'Toole back here again, giving you guys another top 5 list. With the release of Incredibles 2 out this weekend, the highly anticipated sequel to The Incredibles, I'm doing a bunch of ranking top 10 videos because of it. And this next one's a top 5 list, not a top 10 list. Me and my special guest here are going to give you guys our top 5 favorite Pixar villains. Now, I wanted to make it top 5 because of two things. To make it more tougher, as well as looking at all the Pixar movies, there really aren't a lot of great Pixar movies. There's just a couple that I can think of that are great. And I do have a special guest talking about these Pixar villains with me. You may not know him, but you should. He's a great guy. He's been on Rotten or Fresh before. That's Scott Sullivan. Scott, welcome to the channel.
Hey Ryan, thank you so much for having me on your channel. I can't wait to do this list with you. Pixar holds a close place to my heart. Toy Story 2 was the first movie I ever saw in theaters, and ever since then, I've just loved about like 90% of the movies they've put out. So I'm really looking forward to doing this list with you.
No problem, man. Thanks for coming on board. And we're going to start the list off right away, guys. We're not starting with honorable mentions. We'll reveal those before our number 1 pick. So, since Scott is my guest, I'm going to let him go first and give you his number 5. Let's get into it. Scott, what's your number 5?
So for number 5, I have Stinky Pete from Toy Story 2. Now with this villain, you have the prospector. He doesn't want to be around any kids. He just wants to be locked up on a shelf where he can be looked at and admired by everyone. And Woody, he wants to get back to his owner, Andy, and Stinky Pete's trying to prevent that. And ever since I was a kid, Stinky Pete has always just been a great villain to me. I love that part where they're on the luggage carrier, and then he uses his axe to cut off Woody's arm, which was already broken before. And he's just always been a really great villain in my eyes.
Awesome, Scott. Great number 5. You'll see Stinky Pete somewhere in the list, but looking forward to explaining my thoughts on that. All right, coming in at number 5 for me is Ernesto de la Cruz from Coco. Now, this is a spoiler if you haven't seen Coco. Ernesto de la Cruz is the main idol musician that the main character Miguel looks up to. He wants to be just like him, a musician. His family doesn't want him to be a musician, but he finds Ernesto de la Cruz's guitar, and then he goes right back to the Day of the Dead. He meets his past dead relatives, and he thinks Ernesto de la Cruz is his great-great-grandfather because he has the same exact guitar he has. Turns out to be he's not, and it's Hector. But what we find out is Ernesto de la Cruz kills Hector by poisoning his drink, and this makes him a villain. Now, he's in my top 5 because he's an evil person on the inside. He really does fulfill his message in the movie, seize your moment, and he's willing to do anything to seize his moment. He tries to kill Miguel. He throws him off the building, and I just think he's a great villain. I didn't see the twist coming at all, so that's why he made my number 5.
That's a great pick, Ryan, but my number 4 is actually Ernesto de la Cruz. This is one of the most dark villains Pixar has ever made in my eyes. You have this musician who steals songs from his friend Hector, and he ends up poisoning him in the end, and that's just a really dark message to put on kids. Now, I actually saw this twist coming, unfortunately, but the way it was handled was really great, and I just liked everything they did with his character.
Oh, hey, that makes it even better that it's even higher, but he's a great villain overall. Coming in at number 4 for me is a really cool villain. That is Randall from Monsters, Inc. Randall's a really cool, sly villain who's jealous. He's a very jealous villain, especially to Sully. And we do find out in Monsters University that he was Mike Wazowski's college roommate. And then he joins the bullies team in Monsters University, and he's jealous of Sully. He wants to beat him. And in Monsters, Inc., he's a villain. He tries to capture Boo, and then he just fights the heroes. And he's a really cool villain. I like how the way he vanishes and makes it hard for Mike and Sully to try to get Boo. And he's trying to be the number 1 scare over Sully, so Randall's an awesome villain. He's my number 4.
That's a great pick, Ryan. I agree. Randall is a great villain. If this was a top 10 list, he would be on it, but it's not. So my number 3 pick for one of the best Pixar villains would be Syndrome from The Incredibles. I remember being a kid seeing this movie in 2004, and when that reveal happened, that when you find out that Syndrome was the kid from 15 years ago, that just blew my mind as a kid. And to be honest, I really think that Syndrome is a better villain than most of the villains we get in the MCU, to be honest. Like, a kid's movie has a better villain than a Marvel movie. That's just crazy to me. And he plans to terminate all the other superheroes that already exist. And that is why Syndrome is my number 3 Pixar villain.
Oh, we haven't even gotten into Syndrome yet on my list, Scott, but great pick as always. Alright, coming in at number 3 for me is Hopper from A Bug's Life, voiced by Christopher Plummer. Oh, I'm sorry, Kevin Spacey. We don't speak that name here, guys, but Hopper is a very intimidating villain. I freaking love Hopper. I think he's extremely underrated villain. The grasshoppers in particular, they're such assholes to the ants because the ants aren't getting them the amount of food that they want for the winter and the summer. For the first time we see Hopper come in, he's just an intimidating presence that gets stuff done. Such a great character, and Flick has to challenge him, Princess Ada. He's threatening to squish the queen. It's just a really intimidating villain that, just like Scott says, better than most of the MCU villains that Pixar's done.
That's a great pick, Ryan. So for my number 2, I put Sid from the original Toy Story. The very first original OG Pixar villain. Now this guy just loves torturing all these toys, and that's all he wants to do is blow toys up, take their heads off, swap their heads, and he's just a really dark villain. And he's just some kid who lives with his parents, which makes it even more interesting in my opinion. It's made even funnier when you find out in Toy Story 3 that he turns out to be some garbage truck driver.
Sid's an awesome pick, man. I can't blame you. I don't have him in my list because I don't consider him a villain, but I totally understand why I love Sid. Such a cool character. Coming in at number 2 is Syndrome from The Incredibles. For the reasons you said, Scott, Syndrome is better than 95% of the MCU villains. I mean, they've improved on their villains like Thanos and Killmonger, but Syndrome is a great villain. You understand completely why he becomes a villain. He's Electro, the Riddler, and Aldrich Killian from Iron Man 3 done right. He's a huge fan of Mr. Incredible, Bob Parr. He wants to be just like him. He wants to be his sidekick. But Mr. Incredible is just like Fly Home Kid, I work alone. And then he becomes the evil villain Syndrome. And Syndrome just has many quotable lines. In the end, I love when Jack defeats him in the end. That was awesome. And Syndrome, very entertaining and a very creepy, awesome villain. Syndrome is my number 2. Alright, so Scott, now we're going to get into our honorable mentions now, before we review our number 1. So, Scott, what are some of your honorable mentions?
So for my honorable mentions, I have Randall, Darla, Hopper, Chef Skinner. For a minute, I just want to talk about the Screenslaver from Incredibles 2. This would have made my list. I really liked the design they were going for, and the very first scene that he was in with the strobing lights. But once it's revealed who they are, that kind of put them way down on the bottom of the list for me, and that is why the Screenslaver didn't make my list.
I'll say right now, the Screenslaver is also nowhere near my list. Cool concept for a villain, but a bad execution. My honorable mentions, Scott, I only have 2 honorable mentions. The first one's the Prospector from Toy Story 2. Really great villain. You understand completely why he becomes the villain at the end. Like you said, he just wants to be locked away in storage and doesn't want to be with the family. And my last honorable mention, I'm surprised you didn't mention him, but Charles Muntz from Up, voiced by Christopher Plummer. I know some people find him kind of cheesy with the talking dogs, but I like Charles Muntz. He's pretty intimidating. I like the way he fights Carl Fredricksen in the end. Alright, so now guys, we're going to both reveal our number 1. So, Scott, what is your number 1?
My number 1 is Sir Miles Axelrod from Cars 2. I'm just kidding. My real number 1 Pixar villain of all time is Lotso Hugging Bear from Toy Story 3. This is a character who you just start off loving, you want to give him lots of hugs, but then it turns out he has a really dark backstory and he doesn't want to let any of the toys escape the daycare that they are all trapped in. And I just love that entire backstory sequence. You see that he is separated from his previous owner, and then the owner ends up replacing him in the end. And that's just a really sad moment. And it really broke my heart when he tells the big, huge baby, "Oh, she doesn't love you no more." That's a really touching moment, and to me, Lotso Hugging Bear is just a really dark villain, and that is why I enjoyed him so much.
Well, Scott, I love you, man, but You spoil my number one. That's because it's Lotso as well. Lotso Huggenbear. What else needs to be said? I mean, Ned Beatty as the voice is really good. I think people should give him more credit. Lotso Huggenbear, just like you said, Scott, the moment you meet him, you think he's this nice, lovable, cuddly bear who smells like strawberries, but deep down on the inside, he is evil, selfish, and just dark. The darkest villain I've seen from a Disney movie in a while. I mean, this guy, like you said, he runs this prison, runs Sunnyside like a prison, but you understand why? Because of his backstory and his owner. He tries to kill the toys in the end. He's the main reason why they go in the incinerator. My God, why didn't he go in the incinerator? What else needs to be said? Lotso is the best Pixar villain. He's my number one as well. Alright, so there you have it, guys. That was our top 5 favorite Pixar villains. Of course, let us know your rankings down below in the comments section, and whether or not you agree with our list or not. Scott, thank you so much for joining me for this top 5 list, and tell my subscribers where they can find you on your social media.
Great picks, Ryan. Loved your list. Loved your thoughts. You can find me on social media on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook, all on @ScottSullivanTV. That's my username on basically everything. I also have a YouTube, youtube.com/ScottSullivanTV. And I had a really fun time being here talking about our favorite Pixar villains with you, Ryan.
No problem, Scott. Anytime, man. Thank you guys, as always, for watching this top 5 list. And if you guys liked it, give it a thumbs up. And if you're new to the channel, be sure to subscribe to my guest, Scott Sullivan. He has a lot of great videos over there. And to me for more content. All my social media links are in the description down below. Click that notification bell on your way out. And I'll see you guys in the next video. Bye!